It's so interesting.
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 Welcome to It's So Interesting, where people in the arts, sciences, and commerce talk about their experience. I'm your host, George Spitzer. Today, I'm talking with Ann Leatherman, a longtime organist of First Church of Christ Scientist in Santa Barbara. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
I'm curious, before we get into a bit about the organ and why you like the job, how did you get the job, since most organists seem to hold jobs for decades at a time?
For a long time, I wanted to play the organ. I thought it would be wonderful. But the opportunity to study didn't come up until I had finished college. And I was going to go to New York City and work on Henry Street Settlement House. And the minister father of my best friend said he didn't think that was right for me. Why don't you go to Union Theological Seminary School of Sacred Music, which is what I did, and where I began my study of organ. And when I finished Union Seminary, there were no opportunities for women organists, and I had quite a struggle finding my first job, but it came very easily to the Episcopal Church in Alameda.
Were there any women organists, or was that a very rare breed?
It was more rare, and so my first job was in Alameda, conducting the choir and playing the organ. Then we moved to the Midwest, and I did a number of substituting jobs, and even there one of the jobs opened for full-time organist, but because I was a woman, I stayed as the substitute. And when we came to Santa Barbara, eventually this wonderful opportunity opened at First Church of Christ Scientist, where I've been for 22 years, very happy.
And as I understand in the organist trade, so to speak, the 22 years is not very long. Are there other organists who've played in town for longer?
Yes, there's one who's played for over 50 years and others.
So the openings are very rare indeed.
Yes.
Because there are not any more churches being built. It's the other way around.
Not right now.
I see. The organ that you are playing at First Church, is it a stupendous organ, or is it a little teeny-weeny organ? Could you tell me, in terms of relation of what people usually expect when hearing an organ, is it a bright organ? Is it a rich organ? Is it small? I mean, give me a little feeling for what it is you're playing.
It's a medium-sized organ, and it was brought to this church as it was built in 1932, and it had been an organ in Los Angeles in a synagogue, and it had 20 ranks, which means 20 sets of pipes. And in 1964, they added 20 more ranks of pipes, so it has 40 ranks and 2,250 pipes, which have to be tuned 3 times a year.
Each pipe?
Each pipe has to blend, one at a time.
So when we are familiar with a piano tuner tuning a piano,
yes,
it takes him 2 or 3 hours.
Yes.
An organ is in orders of magnitude more things to tune.
Right.
Oh my.
And all kinds of problems with electricity and so forth.
Does it use air that's in the room? Is the air forced into it? Do you control how much air goes into it to blow into the pipes? How does that work?
A long time ago, you used to have maybe a choir boy who pumped the bellows to bring the air into the wind chests where the pipes rested. But now we have an electric blower, and then the bellows are weighted so the air comes in even amounts. And the pipes rest on what are called wind chests, so the air comes into the wind chest. When you open a stop, which lets in a certain rank of pipes, set of pipes, that opens the wind chest to that pipe, set of pipes, and then you press the key and it opens by electrical means, opens the air into the particular pipe.
And you're watching and listening to all this while you're playing at the same time and reading the music and following the service.
Yes.
So you're basically a one-man, or I should say one-woman conductor.
Right.
I see.
We had a small pipe organ in our home in Nebraska, And when we were moving into this house, the window was not covered with curtains, and we had just put the organ in a room, and some little boys came by, rang the bell, and they said, "Are those giant drill bits?" They're arranged in order, just like drill bits in a...
I see. Now, if everybody in a large auditorium, let's say like the size of the Arlington, which is a classic 1930s movie house, held one pipe, there would still be more pipes than people.
Probably, yes. I think that Arlington holds about 22,000 people, so...
2,200, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Most people, of course, just hear an organ. They never see it. It's always somewhere behind a wall or behind a scrim. Can you walk into an organ, or is it just something you have to stand outside of and you lean in and tinker with the
No,
tuning?
we have two chambers or rooms where the pipes are, one on the left, one on the right, and you go upstairs, open the door, and there are all the pipes in front of you, and you climb up and down to reach them.
And can you play the organ while you're in there? I mean, you can't play and be in there at the same time, but
No.
can you play and someone else stand in there?
Yes, it gets mighty loud.
I see. Organ, particularly in a church, regardless of the religion, it's part of the service.
Yes.
I'd be curious to know how an organist handles that, especially a church organist, because you're not just sitting down and performing a piece. You have to basically be secondary to the purpose of the service, but I understand it sort of becomes a major part of the service. So how do you handle that and not disappear altogether as a talented person?
In our church, we have the center part of our service is the lesson, and we've read this lesson all week. And the first reader chooses the hymns, so the organist, having read the lesson, seeing what the hymns are, plans the music around the mood of the lesson, the message of the lesson, and the music supports and enhances the service.
Do you rely on traditional composers or a mixture of traditional and composers from the beginning of last century, this century even? I mean, what kind of mix do you use?
I use music that seems to fit the lesson. It doesn't matter if it's from 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, or 20th century, or even 21st century.
I've been to organ concerts, I've been to services at various churches, and then you hear a whistle coming out of the organ room. What is that, and why is that, and what can be done about it?
The valve that opens the air into the pipe, maybe a little plaster has fallen from the ceiling, or a piece of dust gets underneath and the valve doesn't close, so the pipe keeps sounding.
What's that called?
It's called a cipher.
Except it's very noticeable. Does the weather have anything to do with it?
Well, if it rains and the roof leaks, the plaster drips down in the pipe.
What I was angling for was, of course, whether humidity has a play in it.
Not really, no.
I see.
It might, but...
When I hear the phrase leathers, when it's involved with, or leather, when it involves with an organ, we just heard about all these 2,000 plus pipes, which I assume are made out of metal or wood. Where does the leather come in?
The leather comes in closing the valve that lets the air into the pipe. And if the leather gets old and dry, it won't close again, and that causes a cipher.
I see. That can be pretty expensive to constantly... What do? You replace the leather, or do you polish it with the shoe leather? I mean, how's that maintained?
If it's really bad, they'll replace it.
Do you compose any music yourself, or are you too busy playing the organ?
I have composed pieces.
And has the church been able to let you perform those?
If I wish to. I'm free to pick any pieces I want. So.
I want to touch one other area about you're playing an organ for 22 years. It's a machine, but yet you're on it, I presume, multiple times a week. Does it help being on the same machine for 22 years?
Oh, yes. It's like getting to know a person. You get to know all their little idiosyncrasies and their ups and their downs, and it becomes your friend. And the more you play it, the more you're able to get from it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting.